So I think we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. Thanks for coming out to City Lights Bookstore tonight. We're happy to have Doug Woodward here. He's going to talk about his new book, You Took the Kids Where. Before we begin, though, Thomas Raincrow would like to say a few words. So come on up, Thomas.
Well, this is like old home week, and a lot of friends and old friends not seen for quite a while, so this is fun. And it's fun because of Doug's book, and I thought what I would do, y'all come on in. I wrote a review of this book in the Smoky Mountain News that came out a week ago, and I've known Doug and Trish, and we've been back and forth, and for those of you who don't, is there anybody in here that don't know Doug Woodward or the history of Doug Woodward? Okay, well, there's two people. There's two people here. Yeah. Well, he's a famous whitewater kayaker. That's all I need to tell you, and he's going to tell you everything else. But I thought I would just read the first paragraph from my review, just to kind of get the evening started here. So what I say is, after reading Doug Woodward's book, You Took the Kids Where? As I write these words, it is still officially summer. Well, it's not officially summer anymore. Today's the first day of fall. So, despite its somewhat deceptive title, this book is not about how I spent my summer vacation, or even your usual travel memoir. With a foreword by legendary alternative medical doctor and cultural icon Patch Adams, this book explores new territory in terms of family relationships and outdoor adventure. Woodward has always had a penchant for taking risks and breaking new ground, and like his well-documented extreme whitewater history and notoriety, this history of his family's travels through the years falls right in line with that storyline. In short, this book reads like high adventure fiction, only this is not fiction, this is a memoir. Doug Woodward.
Goodness. Oh, thank you all for coming tonight to listen to a few words. And it does, as Thomas said, feel like, just a group of old friends here. So, pretty neat. And it's kind of neater to have part of my family in here too. My wife has said, do not make me stand up, do not point a finger at me. So you'll have to figure out where she is. And my daughter Autumn, who is hiding in the back, is going to actually read a part from her chapter. One thing I did with this book, and I didn't realize it when I began it, but it took me so long to write this thing that it began changing. And I said, well, the kids are all adults now. They're not kids anymore. So it'd be interesting to see what their lives are like now that they've flown away from us. And so I asked each of them to write something for the book. They didn't all respond immediately but as so I said, I'm going to take some of your words that you've written in the past and put in there. That's what I did. But then, as it got toward print time, hey, Dad, I want to write something and put that in there, or I have another piece that I'd rather see. So they all got active with contributing to their own chapter in the end of the book. And as a beginning of what this book is about, whoops, I don't think I'm attached to anything.
That's one microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that part of your setup?
It's all right.
Don't worry about it. Trish and I both lived in the Atlanta area, not in Atlanta, but out in the periphery of it. We Met in '79 while we were each having adventures. They were backpacking, and these continued right through our marriage in '81. And I had made remarks about time being worth a lot more than money, and she put me to that test, and we took a big leap in the fall of '82, and we came to the mountains having sold or given away everything in Atlanta, sold our place where we were living, and see if we could shrink and live on a budget and have a lot of time to do adventures, again on a budget, that we had always talked about. So here we are, 4 kids later, because we didn't have any when we left Atlanta. And we did build our own house, literally. That's in the book, and our leaving Atlanta is in the book. But I will jump to some of our adventures in reading, and feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. You know, there's nothing sacred about my getting up here and talking. So anyway, we will start on a bike trip. We're out on the Oregon coast, traveling south on the coast, eventually crossing over in the Smith River drainage. For those of you who might be familiar with it, coming back up the Willamette Valley and doing a large rectangle back to our starting point. And here are a few words from that part of the book. It's mid-afternoon as Trish and I decide to make camp, give the kids playtime free of the bike seat confinement, and examine our planned route as we are about to turn away from the coast. We pull into the woodsy hiker-biker site of Honeyman State Park and begin to unload the bikes. I'll pause to say one of the very nice things about camping in Oregon is that they have campsites that are dedicated to those who are traveling by some slow means, either on foot or by bicycle. And you can always count on a spot to camp. Look, Autumn is pointing to a picnic table 50 feet away. What appears to be a body on the tabletop is completely covered by a tattered olive drab army blanket. What is it? Who is it? Is it alive or dead, we wonder. Forrest tiptoes to the edge of the table, then returns to our sight. I saw the blanket move up and down a little, whispers Forrest, who appears to have been holding his own breath. So he must be still alive. We set up camp as quickly as we can, and speak to each other in hushed tones. An hour later, the body struggles into an upright position, the blanket sliding to the ground, and a grizzled face stares blankly in our direction. Sending him a few smiles, we furtively glance his way, trying not to prejudge him on his appearance. His clothing shows dark stains and considerable wear, his shoes approaching the end of their life. His hair, what there is of it, is matted in disarray, and a couple of weeks' worth of stubble covers a deeply lined countenance. It appears that all of his possessions are contained in 2 black plastic bags. It takes only a moment for Trish and me to express the same thought. Forrest, find out his name and tell him we have plenty if he'd like to eat with us tonight. 4-year-old Forrest is there in a flash, but is in no hurry to return. He climbs onto the table to sit beside his new friend, whose name he discovers is Art. To our wonder, they carry on a serious conversation for the next hour and a half. 2 other biking couples arrive to make camp, chat briefly with us about their travels and ours, but completely ignore Art. The weather has been unseasonably cool, so we build a fire at dinner time. Forrest and Art stroll over to our table, Art with a noticeable limp. Trish has put together a pot of pasta with all the veggies we can dig out of our panniers to saute. Making sure Art has the largest plate, we eat it all, then listen to his story. Art is 59. He is from Baltimore, having worked all his life, most of it for a construction firm, which laid him off 2 years ago. His unemployment benefits have ended. He is too young to receive the Social Security he has accumulated, and too old to be considered for the job market. He has wandered from one area of the country to another in a fruitless search for work. One of his black bags is used to collect aluminum cans, one of the few ways he can produce a bit of cash on his own. The police in Reedsport, not friendly to the homeless, told him to move on yesterday. He walked through the night, exhausted, to reach this campground. Following dinner, and having asked our permission, Art moves his blanket to our table in order to sleep near the campfire. In the morning, we share our cereal with him, make him peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and slip him a $20 bill. He is grateful, and we feel we've done all that we're able to do. We pack and pedal on, knowing that we will resupply our own food in Reedsport. But the next evening, as we're camped at the Smith River, Forrest startles my complacency with 2 questions. Dad, what will happen to Art? He said he won't go back to Reedsport again. I don't know, Forrest. I guess he'll keep heading north. Did you give him our address and phone number at home? No, I didn't. We're both silent as I find myself unable to tell my young son that I drew a line, excusing myself from any further responsibility toward Art. As we sit together, I'm not able to justify this to myself, let alone to Forrest. Forrest has learned a great deal from his time with Art, but I'm not happy with what he has to learn from me. Years later, another incident caused me to recall Forrest's time spent with Art in that campsite on the Oregon coast. We're halfway through a 200-mile bike camping journey on Pennsylvania's Great Allegheny Passage. As we pass through a town park, the trail suddenly climbs, and I try to downshift too quickly, popping my chain off of its sprocket. A boy of 8 or 10 rushes over to ask what happened, and as I tell him, he says that his bike has done the same thing. He is wide-eyed, though, at the heavy panniers and load of camping gear bungeed behind my seat. How far are you going, he asks, perhaps wondering what the chances of his doing a similar journey someday might be. Before I can answer, a man's voice booms from the family picnic table. Jimmy, we've told you never to talk to strangers. Get back here right now. As I ride down the trail, my thoughts drift back to Forrest and Art, their long conversation, the richness of the experience for a 4-year-old, and the understanding that came out of that exchange. Let me skip out of the country a moment. All 4 of the children are now with us. Our youngest, Canyon, is 4 years old. And we have been delightfully connected through a friend here in Macon, I say here in Macon County, over the mountain, Elena Carlson, who is native Peruvian. And we are with her family for a while, and then off on our own for probably the second half of the trip. And that's where we pick up in this chapter. We are an American family in Peru, and though in our month here we've experienced what it is to miss meals and sleep on a concrete floor, we haven't really lived it. We know that in our pockets is the cash that will fill our stomachs with a good meal and the ticket that will take us safely home. Although we are not considered wealthy in the United States, we are aware that our annual income is probably 15 times that of the Peruvian, who considers himself well off. Tonight we are still in Moraz, near enough to the end of our trip that we know we can afford to eat in a restaurant. In fact, even with our family of 6, there is food left over. We asked the restaurant folks to wrap it to go. On the street, it is pouring rain, and folks quickly scoot from the shelter of one doorway or overhang to another. The night is chilly, but our high-tech rain gear and warm layers keep us snug and warm. Our eyes sweep the street alive with dancing puddles. There are many possibilities. We decide on a group of 3 small children huddled against the wall on the opposite sidewalk. In a matter of seconds, we are there. One of the children, a girl of 6 or 7, starts to ask if we would like to buy a piece of candy or give a few centimos. We're not sure which. For a moment, her expression remains blank as we hand her half a pizza and a bowl of fettuccine, still covered with wrapping. Then a light comes to her eyes that we will remember all our lives as she discovers the food and rushes to show her 2 friends. By the time we've recrossed the street, the rare treat is already being devoured. But there are tears in our eyes as we know there are hundreds of others on the street whose night will be no different, and that there will be hundreds of other nights for these same children when no one will buy, and no one will give, and no one will care. For one brief moment, light has shone through the rain, and we and the children have touched. They have taught us one more lesson in love, and it is for this that we are here. Now I'll jump to the last part. I seem to be doing the last part of different adventures, but this one is with my 2 older kids, Cricket and David, who at the time were in their teens. David was 13, Cricket was 15, and we had, the 3 of us, without guides, without any other company, had kayaked for over 2 weeks on the Noatak River in Alaska, 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And the river runs from east to west out of the Brooks Range for about 300 miles, then it turns south for another 100 miles, and the very last part of it, if you choose to do it, is an ocean crossing of Kotzebue Sound. And it's there that I'll pick up in this chapter. Backs ache, arms ache, butts ache. We've been churning against the wind for 11 hours, the last hour and a half alongside Canuck Island, the final piece of the Noatak Delta. The temptation to stop and camp is overwhelming. At 10 p.m., we slide past the downstream tip of Canuck with only a huge question mark ahead of us. 10 miles of open ocean, black night, exhausted bodies. Are we being smart or stupid to leave all land behind and commit to a crossing at this late hour? A spectacular sunset, like embers of fire stretched across the sky, has been underway to our right for almost an hour. The lights of Kotzebue twinkle on the horizon, barely visible, but the ocean is like a mirror, not a breath of wind stirs. No matter how we feel, we know that this is the time to go. A mile out, an Inuit family slows their outboard beside us, and a young man offers a ride. We decline. Though our aching muscles might disagree, the three of us are now into making the total trip under our own paddle power. Halfway across the sound, we polish off the last of the jerky. This was before vegetarian days. And the gourd. All around us in silence. All around us is silence, except for the muted dip of our paddles in the water. The western sky is now blood red behind the mountains and on the watery horizon. Seals break the surface of the color-drenched sea to pause and look at us, turning their heads from one side to the other. As we twist around and make eye contact, they quickly slide out of sight. I watch the sweep of black water behind Cricket and Dave's kayaks and know that we must still be moving forward. At last, the color fades and the wakes become invisible in the night. Cricket sings to help take our minds off the physical exhaustion. John Denver, Jim Croce, Simon and Garfunkel, Barbra Streisand. It's dark now, except for the knife-edged sliver of light at the horizon. Impossible to see each other, even a couple of boat lengths away. But Cricket's singing is the beacon that holds our exhausted trio together. Without it, we will lose each other in the darkness. A layer of cloud and mist hugs the water, gradually winking out the stars above and moving ever nearer to us from the open ocean to the west. If it catches us, our bearings will be gone. We will try to find each other, hold on, and wait out the night. The lights of Kotzebue gleam closer, and we begin to make out the shapes of low buildings behind the glow. It's midnight. We've been paddling close to 14 hours, but now the end is within our grasp. At 12:15 a.m., we slide quietly out of the darkness and nudge the shore at the foot of Mission Street. No wave laps the beach. The ocean is still a black sheet of obsidian. And to move from those adventures to just a little bit of philosophy, here in the Choose Love, Not Fear chapter, and just how, even as homeschoolers, do you handle all the time away from home and the kids missing their studies, you might ask. When we venture into cultures different from our own, do our children take school books with them? Rarely, and not really necessary. The interaction with new friends and the exposure to different ways of life has been their and our primary learning experience. But we most definitely encourage them to keep journals. They will be invaluable as the years pass. If the kids are too young to journal on their own, we have them take 10 or 15 minutes each day to dictate to us those sights and happenings that have most impressed them. And of course, we keep our own journals. Those that we meet always want to see what our lives are like. A small book with photos showing our home, chores, fun activities, pets, favorite places nearby, and more transcends language barriers and creates a bond with those whose lives we've entered. Above all, we try to remember that we are there to learn and be a part of the experience that we are observing. If we isolate ourselves, if we isolate our family in an expensive hotel or behind the tinted windows of a fancy automobile, we would not experience the friendships and lessons for which we came. Initially, we spent time in several English-speaking countries. However, most of our journeys have been to countries south of the United States: Guatemala, Peru, Chile, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, though India and Nepal have given us much as well. When visiting our neighbors in countries with a simpler lifestyle, we live, when possible, with a family, eating what they eat and sleeping under the same thatched or tin roof. And of course, paying our own way so that we're not a burden added to their marginal lifestyle. If we change locations, we'll ride the chicken buses, ancient retired U.S. schools, so named for the baskets of chickens often secured to the roof. We might use a squat hole or a toilet without a seat. And if there's a sewerage system at all, it is not designed to handle toilet paper. That goes into the wastebasket. That is, if you brought paper of your own. And what kind of image will your family project as you make new friends? Though these friends will want to know what your life is like back home, it is not necessary to bring it all along with you. Traveling simply with a single backpack can provide your personal necessities, yet tells the world you're a savvy traveler, as well as counteracting the wealthy American tourist image. The younger your children, however, the more you as parents add to your own load, and there are circumstances where an additional bag will be necessary to carry diapers, snacks, special books, and other items necessary for your children's happiness and comfort. The days spent in sharing the lives of those who at first appear so different from ourselves have been some of the most meaningful educational experiences of our children's lives. And there is little doubt that the same is true for us as parents. As Wade Davis has so eloquently said, the world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit. Autumn?
Hi, I'm Autumn, and one thing that I was thinking about when I was writing this for Dad was just how much I remember of trips when I was like 5 years old, and just memories of sheep or little kids that I met. They just stayed with me, and they still feed me a lot. So that was some of what I wrote about, and we'll read to you for a minute as I was holding up Dad's book publication by writing this. And I wanted to read just a short poem before that, which I wrote for my brother Forrest, who's now a photographer who travels around the world. And so it's just kind of my nod to the travel bug that I think lives in all of us. It's called Inshallah. Out beyond the furthest sea, a deep calling thing it dwells. The gypsy heart it hears with ease, the horses harnessed by. With glinting bells and ribbon silk, a muscled arm laid bare. A ready to ride to this hearkening call, secret and sparkling and fair. Through dark spruce night and damp bog day, and wildflower paths betwixt, in the hidden places the call grows strong, and alert the wanderer journeys, circling the land to the deeper tides, the rhythm of sea and wind. that which calls too far, perhaps, to meet with in this life. Yet walking on to the mountain's breath, the misty hollows and moors, lending an ear to the mossy stone, the fence line, the lock, and the ridge. A light gleams in the heart, like the traveler's fire, sparks glinting hard in the night. The beckoning stirs, a yearning rising, the tug, the glee, as the pull of a mainsail filling with wind. And a fire laid well, a few pieces of silver, a blanket and a flask, a ballad or a book, a steaming cup, and all is there, deep in the traveler's hand, yet nigh and beyond the land. We are grinding up a huge hill above the sea, Dad and I. Dad's legs straining and his t-shirt soaked in sweat, bike pedals slowly circling, and me snug in my sturdy plastic child carrier behind him. I am free to watch the pancake rocks, yet convinced I am part of the effort, at least so far as a hill-sized ration of Cadbury fruit and nut chocolate bar is concerned. When we pause to refuel, Dad breaks off the little waffle milk chocolate pieces with the rumpled dark raisins sticking out the sides and hands them back to me. Seabirds swirl around the huge sea stacks, which really do look like towering piles of pancakes, delighting me. The ocean crashes in sheets of white spray far below. My earliest childhood memory is of loons playing with me. I was nestled in the center of a canoe between Mom and Dad, their own tiny baby bird. The black and white loons bobbed up and down, and I, delighted by the game, bobbed up and down with them. I'd peep over the canoe's gunwale and then hide below it. We were on the Bowron Lakes in British Columbia, Canada. To this day, I have a feeling of beautiful connection with them and the experience of being deeply regarded and embraced, included by other creatures. When I think of something that defines my parents' approach to life and our education, it is a thrilling tickle of curiosity. My folks fed me. Boy, did they ever. They fed my ravenous mind, my bubbling creative impulses, my fascination with texture, my hunger for connection with different ways of thinking and peculiar sorts of people who lived mysterious lives. Somehow they knew that they didn't have to push me towards knowledge or teach me how to learn. They just had to pour fuel toward the spark of learning in non-linear ways. I remember my fascination with sinkholes in New Zealand. It was clear to me that they could suck a farmer right down through his field as they had the very old moa birds, and they had that queer, bright green color around them. I remember crossing a high swinging bridge near a waterfall carrying my fairy box, a cardboard egg carton to which I had carefully added magical objects from nature. On a sandbar, Mom and I picked up scallop shells bigger than my palms that had lush, bright colors. I remember noticing that there were other people moving about the islands like us in beautifully crafted wooden caravans built onto trucks. Curiosity for 3 months led us in beautiful paths over the rugged landscapes, and I know that even at the age of 5, who I was being fed by that trip. My mom, a brilliant and gifted teacher, believes that language development and vocabulary are based on a child's participation in an incredibly broad range of experiences. Sometimes a poem would come tumbling out at the swing set with urgency, and I'd pop over to Dad, who I knew was always handy with scraps of paper and a pen in his leather glasses case in his shirt pocket. He'd be ready to lovingly write a dictation as I blurted out a verse, so that this sweet little winged thing didn't just fly over the ridge without me. Mom made beautiful books for me out of large pieces of manila paper and string, and would take lengthy dictations about sheep and castles and witches, which I'd illustrate. Later, she encouraged mad, inventive spelling neatly scrawled across pages. She didn't allow spelling itself to get in the way of what it existed to support. This listening, discovering, and finding followed in our travels and gave me the basis for composition in my life. Based in improvisation, I rely on an ability to follow wild inner nudges to unknown ends.
I think unless anyone else wants to read in the family who is in here, why that is probably it. I'd be glad to entertain questions about the book, about what it represents. And I hope any of you are curious. Yes?
So, did you homeschool all of your children for all of their school life, K through 12?
They all graduated high school, quote, as homeschoolers. And we encourage, well, that's not the right word. We said that whatever path you choose is fine. College is not a necessity, although in the end they all did choose that. And even though they had, well, Autumn, for instance, never had a grade as a homeschooler. We did have some hybrids in Macon County. You could take 2 classes at the high school and as a homeschooler and participate in extracurricular activities. So the boys all did that, but even so, what was presented to the colleges in their applications was a construct of a combination of but I won't say fictitious grades, but grades that represented what they had done without ever having them, tied to earning a grade while they were doing it. And one of the keys was a portfolio that each would put together. It might be, usually it was about 50 pages long. It had many of experiences like are in the book, as well as specific things they might have done academically on their own. And these were a key, I'd say, to acceptance.
So, is there an incident, a story, an adventure that you took kids on that you wish you would have had in the book but couldn't because, or didn't, chose not to? We want to know that one.
More things have gone in and been taken out of the book. I mean, whole adventures and stories, and they're just too many to make it a readable book. And I don't mean this because we've been, quote, world travelers. So many of our adventures were close to home or in the U.S. and that's what we try to encourage in the book, is that anyone can do this to any extent that they want. I mean, we were a little bit radical in leaving our traditional jobs and trusting the things that would happen along the way, and so far it's worked. But, and that's been 35 years now. Wow. But yes, there are. I could probably write several more books. Just of adventures.
What would you say as far as how often you were traveling during the year? Was it generally 50% of the time you were away from home, or what?
No, I'd say often there was a large trip. I mean, sometimes we would take 2 summer months and go west, just camping out of a van that we had at the time. Having our toys on there. We had a tandem bicycle for a while, because once the kids graduated out of the bike trailer or the bike seat behind us, they could pedal usually with Trish or with myself, and then graduate to their own BMX bikes with a little rack and panniers on them, and they did some tremendous trips at 7 and 8 years old. So we did. There were a lot of trips close to home where the weather would be good, and we'd say, "Well, water's good. It's time to get on a river." We'd go out for an overnight or something like that. But I'd say often we got, at first we got out of the country maybe every couple of years or so, and then we got intrigued with going south. First it was Costa Rica, which was a gentle experience, and then some of the other Central and South America countries. And they were very inexpensive to travel in, particularly the way we traveled, camping, and we'd have a tent set up and local kids might be around there waiting for our kids to appear, kick a soccer ball, or try out some words of English on them. And it was just a very close experience that way.
If there are 2 or 3 things that you would like us to take home with us tonight besides your book, some real gems that you want us all to know, what would you say?
I would say take the kids with you when possible. Don't leave them with grandparents. Don't leave them with even very reputable caretakers of some sort, but share your own time with them and give them that experience. And you can continue to experience adventure in a couple of different ways after you've had children. And my big recommendation is doing it with them. And hopefully there is enough in the book that you could get started to whatever degree you wanted. I mean, if you've never put panniers on a bicycle or a child behind you on a seat, why, that is a possibility, and their equipment lists and things were, doing it on a short term or more on an expedition type of thing. And a third thing, my kids.
I think I get out of it a love of nature and a love of the whole world and the beauty of the physical, the geography, everything, along with this business that you've talked so much about and so well about the people. But I see it as a real love of the land, the sea, the sky, the whole business.
Thanks, Nan. I appreciate those words, and I think that's true. I've maybe in the readings I did tonight been heavy on the people part of it. Maybe not with the Alaska trip, but certainly showing a child, your child, how she relates to the wild country and to nature around us, and just how to live within it, be kind to it, is a very important aspect. Thanks for having the third one. Claire.
Well, I wanted to say thank you to Doug and Trish, because this might be an opportunity that I have to publicly say thank you, but Joe and I lived in Nebraska, and I really wanted to homeschool. We had one child, And the only other homeschool family I met was homeschooling because they were afraid. They were afraid to expose their kids. And I said, there's got to be more than this. And we moved to Western North Carolina, and the first day that we moved to Franklin, we went to the library to get library cards. And Doug and Trish had put a note up in the library saying, do you want to homeschool? And we called them right away. And although this book is so filled with all the adventures in many places around the world, there were so many adventures right in Franklin that I really thank you guys. Their kids were a little bit older than ours, but Trish and I were pregnant at the same time with Canyon and Jamie. And we had so many adventures that were filled with just happiness about teaching our kids joy and learning and respect for others and love. And I really learned so much from these guys. Plus, I was on a rafting trip with Doug where there was a very disbehaving guy, and he would fall out of the raft, and Doug would be leading us, and then he'd just reach his hand out when the guy was falling out of the raft and grab him and put him in. Who does that? That was kind of a superhero feature. But no, seriously, I'm just very thankful that we got to homeschool together and everything I learned from you guys. So.
Thank you, Claire.
At this stage, do you have any family trips planned with your kids grown and living in different places? Is it harder to get everybody together and do that?
It's a little more difficult with they're living their own lives and doing their own things, but every now and then it works. We got, let's see, 3 years ago on the Grand Run River in Oregon, all 6 of my kids, the 4 that are Trish and mine and my 2 older ones, to do a raft trip for a week down the Grand Run, and that was a fabulous trip. So, but right now we don't have all 6 of us scheduled for one, but we're always keeping that possibility in mind, seeing what we can do.
But the Grand Canyon trip, that was a good trip.
That was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
That was 3 years ago also. It was a winter trip for a month, and it came about by my son Forrest saying, "Hey Dad, I've got a permit." This was a private trip. He said, "I've got a spot for you on a raft trip down the Grand Canyon. Would you like to come?" And I said, "You bet I would." Anyway, the 2 of us essentially, or it was, there were 6 16-foot rafts on that trip. And Forrest and I had one of them. There were several kayakers along with us also. Despite being the middle of winter, it was a fabulous time, and there are those here tonight, like Jamie Beth, who has experienced the same kind of trip. So, and Forrest ended up making a 9-minute video based on that trip, but it was more apparent child abuse than almost everyone who has seen it. So I had to get my handkerchief out. It was a very special film. You can still watch it on Vimeo or on YouTube. It's called The Important Places, and his chapter of the book mentions that also.
Doug, you said don't leave your kids with your grandparents, but I anticipate that at some point you're gonna be a grandparent. So I'm just wondering if you really meant that. You're telling us not to leave our kids with our.
I should qualify that remark. As a habit,
Oh, okay.
don't do it. Certainly, it's a delightful thing.
I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Thanks for clarifying that.
You're welcome again.
Well, thank you all for coming. There are no
Thank you, Doug.
further questions.
We have